The air in Terminal 3 hummed with the usual symphony of hurried footsteps, muffled announcements, and the distant rumble of jet engines. Travelers, a diverse tapestry of humanity, flowed like a river towards their gates, some clutching coffees, others wrestling with oversized luggage. Sunlight streamed through the vast windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the artificial breeze, creating an almost serene tableau. Then, a sharp, piercing bark shattered the momentary calm. It wasn't a playful yelp, but a resonant, insistent cry that cut through the ambient noise, instantly seizing the attention of everyone within earshot. All eyes snapped towards the source. A sturdy German shepherd, ears perked, hackles slightly raised, its powerful body vibrating with an undeniable intensity. The dog wasn't just barking, it was fixated, its gaze locked onto a seemingly innocuous, dark-colored backpack resting unattended on a bench near a row of closed kiosks. The object, which had been invisible to the human eye moments before, now pulsed with an unspoken threat, bathed in the sudden glaring spotlight of the K9's alarm. Almost immediately, heads began to turn. Conversations died mid-sentence. The flow of human traffic faltered, forming small, hesitant eddies around the focal point of the dog's urgent warning. At the other end of the leash, Officer David Miller felt the familiar jolt of Rex's powerful pull, a signal he had come to interpret with unerring accuracy over their 5 years together. Miller was a figure of quiet authority, his broad shoulders and watchful eyes reflecting years of dedicated service as a K9 officer for airport security. His uniform was crisp, his movements deliberate, but beneath the practiced calm, a current of focused readiness always ran. Rex, his magnificent German Shepherd partner, was more than just a dog. He was an extension of Miller's own senses, a highly trained, impeccably disciplined animal with an astonishing track record of detecting the slightest anomalies. Rex had sniffed out narcotics tucked into seemingly impossible hiding places, money concealed within computer towers, and on one memorable occasion, a forgotten piece of fruit that had triggered a full agricultural alert. Their bond was forged through countless hours of training, shared patrols, and an unspoken understanding that transcended mere command and obedience. Miller trusted Rex's instincts implicitly, an absolute faith born of experience. When Rex barked like this, it wasn't a casual warning, it was a declaration. The backpack sat there, an island of potential danger in a sea of unsuspecting travelers. Miller's gaze swept over it, assessing its ordinary appearance. No obvious wires, no strange protrusions. Yet, Rex's barks continued, deep and guttural, each one building on the last, sending ripples of unease through the terminal. The dog's tail was down, his posture rigid, his entire being screaming alarm. This wasn't a scent of contraband. This was different. This was something that had disturbed Rex on a much deeper, more primal level. Passengers closest to the scene began to edge away, subtle shifts, almost imperceptible at first, but quickly growing into a noticeable withdrawal. A young couple pulled their child closer. A businessman paused his phone call, his brow furrowed with concern. The collective energy in the terminal shifted, morphing from bustling efficiency to a palpable tension. Miller's hand tightened on Rex's leash, his mind already cycling through protocols. Rex's persistence was the key. He wasn't just reacting, he was demanding attention, demanding action. This wasn't a false alarm. "Easy, boy," Miller murmured, his voice low and steady, a calming counterpoint to Rex's agitated barks, though his eyes never left the backpack. Other security personnel, alerted by the commotion and the distinctive sound of a K9 unit's urgent warning, began to converge. Their faces, too, reflected a growing concern. They knew Rex's reputation. They knew Officer Miller's dedication. And they knew that when Rex barked like this at an unattended item, it meant serious business. The scene, moments ago a picture of everyday airport life, had transformed into something far more sinister. The seemingly innocuous backpack, now the epicenter of Rex's unwavering attention, had become a focal point of intense suspicion and immediate fear. The stakes, though not yet fully understood, had abruptly ratcheted upwards. This was no routine check. This was a potential incident unfolding in real time, sparked by the unerring instincts of a highly trained animal. The quiet professionals of airport security braced for the unknown, their training kicking in. This was just the beginning. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories and incredible K9 heroics. Rex's persistent barks echoed through the terminal, each sharp sound amplifying the uneasy silence that had fallen over the immediate vicinity. Officer Miller, his hand firmly on Rex's harness, felt the tension radiate from the powerful animal. The backpack, seemingly ordinary just moments ago, now exuded an almost palpable aura of menace. Passengers who had initially paused out of curiosity were now actively backing away, their casual strolls replaced by hurried retreats. A ripple of silent panic, more unsettling than outright chaos, began to spread. Miller instinctively widened his stance, keeping Rex focused but also acutely aware of the shifting crowd dynamics. Additional security personnel, responding to Miller's urgent radio call, converged rapidly. Their arrival was swift and disciplined, a testament to the rigorous training they all underwent for such scenarios. First, a perimeter was established, quickly marked by yellow tape and the stern, unsmiling faces of officers redirecting curious onlookers. The cordoning off of the immediate area around the abandoned backpack felt less like a protective measure and more like a demarcation line before an unknown battle. The hum of the terminal, once a constant backdrop of human activity, was replaced by a strained quiet, punctuated only by Rex's low, guttural growls and the crackle of security radios. The backpack itself became the focal point of all anxieties, an inanimate object transformed into an embodiment of potential danger. Its nondescript fabric and casual placement belied the fear it now inspired. It represented the ultimate obstacle, the unknown. What dark secrets did it hold? A device capable of mass destruction? A dangerous biological agent? The questions hung heavy in the air, fueling the rapid internal assessment of every security professional on site. Their immediate challenge was monumental: to identify and neutralize whatever threat lay within those zippered compartments without triggering widespread hysteria in an already stressed environment. Initial security protocols swung into full effect with practiced efficiency. Airport announcements, initially calm and reassuring, became progressively more urgent, requesting the owner of a forgotten black backpack to report to Gate B12 immediately. The pretense of a lost item was maintained for as long as possible, a thin veil over the burgeoning crisis. Meanwhile, a bomb disposal unit was already en route, sirens faintly audible in the distance, growing steadily louder. Officer Miller, while maintaining his position with Rex, observed the bomb squad technicians preparing their specialized equipment. These were the moments that tested every fiber of his being, the precise intersection where routine patrol could escalate into a fight for countless lives. He watched as the technicians, clad in their heavy protective suits, began their slow, deliberate approach. Each step was measured, each glance analytical. Their presence, while reassuring to the security team, did little to alleviate the underlying fear among the scattered passengers. Many now huddled behind distant barriers, their faces etched with concern. The air itself seemed to thicken, laden with the unspoken dread of what might happen next. Rex, still vibrating with an intensity that only Miller fully understood, continued to eye the backpack with unwavering suspicion. His instincts were rarely wrong, and that fact alone was enough to keep everyone on edge. The quiet ticking of the terminal clock seemed to deafen, each second amplifying the weight of the unfolding drama. This was not merely a lost bag. Rex's reaction confirmed it was something far more sinister, a looming shadow over the bustling heart of the airport. The wait for the bomb disposal unit's assessment felt interminable, a suffocating pause before a potential catastrophe. The initial scans from the bomb disposal unit's specialized equipment began to paint a more complex and disturbing picture. A series of low, rhythmic beeps echoed softly from the device, each one a confirmation of the growing suspicion that this was no mere abandoned luggage. The readings were erratic, showing a dense, unusual concentration of materials not typical of personal belongings. There was something undeniably artificial, something designed within the fabric of the backpack. This wasn't merely a threat, it was a confirmed threat, escalating the urgency of the situation beyond anything Officer Miller had hoped. The subtle panic among passengers, which had been simmering, now threatened to boil over as hushed conversations ceased, replaced by wide, fearful eyes darting between the backpack and the increasingly grave faces of the security team. Officer Miller felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. His gaze flickered from the readings on the bomb tech's monitor to Rex, who remained steadfast by his side, occasionally offering a low growl towards the ominous bag. Rex's vigilance was unwavering, a testament to his training, but Miller couldn't shake the sense of dread that permeated the air. For years he had trained for moments like these, for the precise execution of protocol under duress. Yet, the human element of it all, the sheer unpredictability of a malicious mind, always lurked beneath the surface. He pictured scores of innocent travelers, families on vacation, business professionals rushing to meetings, all now potentially caught in the crosshairs of whatever lay within that backpack. His professional duty, a bedrock of his entire adult life, demanded a calm, unwavering response. But the concern for his fellow citizens, for the vulnerable souls currently being ushered away, and especially for Rex, his loyal partner who would follow him into any danger, created a profound internal struggle. He was a protector, and the thought of failing that core responsibility gnawed at him. The bomb disposal technician, a young woman with an unnervingly steady hand and intense focus, adjusted a dial on her scanner. "Readings are inconsistent," she murmured, more to herself than to the assembled officers. "High-density metallic components, several localized energy signatures, and something else." Her brow furrowed, a tiny crease appearing between her eyes. Just as she was about to elaborate, a faint, almost imperceptible whirring sound emanated from the backpack. It was subtle, barely audible over the distant murmurs of the evacuating terminal, but it was there, distinct and mechanical. Then, a small, multicolored light, barely larger than a pinpoint, flickered to life on the side of the bag, piercing the dull gray fabric. It wasn't a reflection. It was clearly illuminated from within. The whirring intensified, growing slightly louder, more defined. It sounded like gears shifting, or a small motor powering up. The bomb tech's eyes widened, moving from the scanner to the backpack. "Wait," she breathed, her voice now tinged with an unmistakable urgency. "It's activating." The light pulsed once, twice, then began to glow steadily, casting an eerie, faint luminescence around the bag. It wasn't an explosion, Not yet, but the sudden, unexpected surge of activity from within the backpack was terrifyingly clear. It was either a trigger mechanism engaging, a timer counting down, or some intricate device powering on, transforming a passive object into an active threat. Adrenaline surged through Miller's veins, sharp and cold. This was no longer a potential threat. It was live. The pulsing light, a beacon of immediate danger, ignited a flurry of controlled, yet frantic, activity. Time, which had already stretched thin, now seemed to accelerate at an alarming rate, each second carrying the weight of potentially catastrophic consequences. The bomb disposal team, their faces etched with grim determination, moved with practiced efficiency, their movements precise and economical as they prepared for what could only be a controlled intervention. Specialized tools were unholstered, protective gear double-checked, and communication channels confirmed. Every member understood the gravity of the situation. The margin for error was non-existent. Simultaneously, the terminal, once a vibrant hub of human activity, transformed into a ghost town. The last echoes of hurried footsteps and urgent intercom announcements faded into an unsettling silence. Authorities had implemented a full evacuation, clearing out every last soul from the vast structure, funneling them into designated assembly points far from the potential blast radius. The air grew heavy with the unspoken fear of what might happen, leaving behind only the security personnel, the bomb squad, and the ominous backpack. Officer Miller stood his ground, a pillar of steadfast resolve amidst the escalating tension, his hand resting instinctively on Rex's head. A profound dilemma gnawed at Miller. Rex, his partner, his shadow, was a highly trained K-9 officer, an invaluable asset in situations like this with his unparalleled senses and protective instincts. His presence offered a tangible sense of reassurance, a silent guardian against the unknown. Yet, with every passing second, the risk to Rex intensified. Miller's duty demanded he stay, face the threat head-on, but his deep affection for the German Shepherd screamed at him to send Rex to safety, to spare him from the unthinkable. He wrestled internally, the professional warrior battling the devoted companion. His eyes met Rex's, and the dog responded with an unwavering gaze, a silent promise of loyalty. How could he send him away? How could he keep him here? The conflict ripped at him, a silent agony in the face of imminent danger. Miller ultimately made the agonizing choice, a decision born of both duty and love. He issued a quiet command. Rex, secure perimeter, far, pointing towards the distant, now empty gate. Rex, after a hesitant glance, obeyed, trotting away with a visible reluctance, looking back several times as he disappeared into the deserted concourse. Miller watched him go, a heavy weight settling in his chest, then turned back to the backpack, his resolve hardening. The evacuation, though rapid and organized, had been chaotic in its own way. People had dropped belongings in their haste, leaving behind a trail of forgotten items. As a senior officer conducted a final sweep of the immediate cordon area, ensuring no one remained, his boot scuffed against something small and white near a discarded sandwich wrapper, just a few feet from where the backpack sat. He bent down, his gloved hand retrieving a crumpled piece of paper. It was a note, hastily scribbled, folded roughly, and partially obscured by a smudge of dirt. He unfolded it carefully, his eyes scanning the urgent script. "To whom it may concern," it began, "this is not what you think. It is a message, a warning. Look closer. Understand." The officer's breath hitched. This wasn't a bomb note, a demand, or a threat of violence in the traditional sense. It was cryptic, yes, but it hinted at something far more complex, a deliberate attempt to communicate. He immediately handed it to Officer Miller, his eyes wide with a new kind of urgency. Miller took the note, his gaze sweeping over the few lines of text. The whirring from the backpack continued, the multicolored light still pulsed, but suddenly the entire scenario shifted. This wasn't merely a device, it was a statement. The note, a small, unassuming piece of paper, had just provided a crucial, potentially game-changing clue, transforming the very nature of the threat from anonymous terror to something deeply personal, something with a motive that needed to be understood. The bomb squad chief, observing the exchange, leaned in, her brow furrowed in thought as she read the message over Miller's shoulder. The pressure remained, but now it was accompanied by a flicker of bewildered curiosity. The small, discarded note, hastily scrawled and crumpled, proved to be the pivotal shift in the entire terrifying ordeal. It lay just meters from the ominous backpack, almost swallowed by the frantic rush of evacuating feet, yet miraculously preserved. Officer Miller himself had spotted it, a flash of white amidst the grays and browns of the terminal floor. With a gloved hand, he carefully retrieved it, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The message was brief, almost poetic, but undeniably cryptic. They call it security. I call it suffocation. Let this light illuminate the truth. There was no mention of violence, no explicit threat of harm, only a desperate plea for understanding, a stark indictment of the very systems Miller had dedicated his life to upholding. This single, fragmented clue immediately began to unravel the preliminary assessment of the threat. No longer did it scream terrorism in the chilling, unambiguous language of pure malice. Instead, it whispered of a personal protest, perhaps even a cry for help, a desperate and misguided attempt to draw attention to a grievance, however distorted. The fear of an imminent, devastating explosion, while not entirely dismissed, now shared space with a new, equally profound concern: the potential for a deeply troubled individual to be making a statement. The implications were immense. It meant shifting from a purely destructive threat to one that required a far more nuanced response, prioritizing de-escalation and understanding the underlying motive over immediate, brute force neutralization. The head of airport security, a stern woman named Captain Ramirez, her face etched with exhaustion but her eyes sharp, absorbed Miller's findings. A protest, she mused, her voice low. Not a bomb, but something designed to cause maximum disruption and fear. The readings, perhaps some kind of elaborate electronic display intended to mimic a device? Her gaze swept over the bomb disposal team, who were now huddled, reevaluating their strategies. The robotic arm, poised for an initial intervention, slowly retracted. The intricate dance of wires and sensors might not be a detonator, but a complex circuit board, a performance art piece, or perhaps a highly sophisticated, attention-grabbing gadget. The bomb tech, who had previously been focused solely on explosive detection, now considered other possibilities. The power source is significant, she noted, and the metallic components are arranged in an artistic pattern almost, not standard bomb construction. This shift in perspective was not without its own set of dangers. A misguided protest could still trigger panic, cause stampedes, or even contain harmful, though non-explosive, elements. But it profoundly altered the operational approach. Instead of a direct, potentially destructive intervention, the new priority became isolating the device, attempting to understand its full functionality, and, crucially, trying to communicate with whoever might be behind it. The goal was no longer solely to disarm, but to engage, to de-escalate, and to prevent further chaos. As the security forces adjusted their strategy, a fleeting memory surfaced in Officer Miller's mind, a vivid flashback to Rex's early training days. He remembered a particular exercise, a mock-up of a crowded street where Rex was being trained to detect specific contraband. Amidst the planned chaos, a frightened child had cried out, hidden behind a street vendor's stall. Rex, despite being focused on his task, had instinctively veered off, nudging the child gently, licking away tears, his usually fierce barks replaced by soft whines of concern. Miller had been astonished. It wasn't a scent Rex was trained for, but an undeniable human distress. It was then Miller truly understood the depth of Rex's empathy, his ability to sense not just danger, but also profound human distress, a quality that transcended mere training. Rex's initial unrelenting barks at the backpack now took on a new layer of meaning. Was it merely the unusual components of a potential device, or was Rex sensing the deeply personal, perhaps even desperate human intent behind it? The memory solidified Miller's conviction that this situation was far more complex than it initially appeared, requiring not just tactical precision, but also a measure of understanding and empathy. The pulsing light on the backpack intensified, casting strange, dancing shadows on the deserted terminal floor. Officer Miller, his heart hammering against his ribs, focused on the bomb disposal technician whose face was a mask of grim determination. "Any new readings?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. She shook her head, her gaze glued to the glowing bag. "Still complex. The internal structure seems to be shifting. It's not just powering on, it's reconfiguring." This wasn't a standard explosive device. That much was becoming agonizingly clear. What kind of threat evolved in real time? Miller took a deep, steadying breath, his mind racing. The cryptic note they'd found earlier flashed before his eyes. For the unheard. It wasn't definitively a bomb threat, but rather an act of extreme, desperate protest. This new information, coupled with the strange activation pattern, ignited a new strategy in his mind. Conventional explosive specialists were trained to neutralize, to disarm, to destroy. But if this was a protest, an attempt to make a statement, then perhaps there was another way. A way to engage, to communicate. He signaled to the bomb tech to hold her position, a silent command for her to pause any immediate intervention. Then he spoke, his voice projected clearly and calmly towards the backpack, relying on the surprising acoustics of the emptied terminal. "To whoever is listening," he began, his tone even, devoid of aggression. "We understand you want to be heard. We see the backpack. We see the light." He paused, letting his words hang in the heavy silence, searching for any flicker of response, any subtle change from the glowing object. Rex, sensing the shift in his handler's approach, lowered his head slightly, his ears pricked forward, listening intently. The agonizing wait for a response stretched into an eternity. Each second felt like a minute, each minute an hour. The only sounds were the distant faint hum of the building mechanics and the almost imperceptible whirring from the backpack, which now seemed to have settled into a rhythmic, almost hypnotic pulse. Miller could feel the weight of countless eyes on him, even as the terminal remained eerily empty. He knew his fellow officers, the bomb squad. They were all holding their breath, wondering if his unconventional approach would yield anything other than further escalation. He tried again, his voice carrying a note of empathy this time. "We want to understand your message. We want to help. There are ways to make your voice heard without putting anyone at risk. Please, if you're in the terminal, if you're watching, let us know you're safe." Let us know your intentions." He scanned the vast, empty terminal, his eyes sweeping over the rows of abandoned seats, the closed duty-free shops, the silent departure boards. The possibility that the controller was still somewhere nearby, perhaps hiding, observing, became a tangible thought. Outside the airport, the world was in a frenzy. Television screens in homes and public spaces across the country blared frantic news reports. Helicopters circled overhead, their rotors a distant thrum. News anchors, with grave faces, speculated on the nature of the threat, showing grainy footage of the massive evacuation. Families, distraught and anxious, huddled together at designated safe zones, clutching their phones, desperate for any update about their loved ones who might have been inside. The pressure on the security teams, already immense, ratcheted up with every passing minute of global scrutiny. Miller felt it, a cold, constricting band around his chest, reminding him of the immense responsibility he carried. He adjusted his stance, maintaining eye contact with the glowing backpack, a silent, tense standoff between human and unknown. "We can assure you of your safety," Miller pledged, his voice steady despite the internal turmoil. "No one wants to see anyone get hurt. Just tell us what you want. Tell us how to resolve this peacefully." The whirring from the backpack seemed to undulate slightly, the light flickering with a subtle change in its rhythm. Was it a response? Or merely the intricate device continuing its strange internal reconfiguration? The suspense was nearly unbearable, a palpable thing that hung heavy in the air, thick enough to choke on. Every fiber of his being was attuned to that backpack, waiting, hoping for a sign, any sign, that his risky gamble might pay off. Then, with a soft, almost mechanical sigh, the backpack's main zipper began to slowly, deliberately unfasten itself. It wasn't a sudden tear or a violent burst, but an unhurried, almost theatrical release. Officer Miller watched, every muscle tensed, Rex standing rigid at his side, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. The whirring sound intensified, accompanied by new, higher-pitched electronic chirps. As the zipper opened wider, a complex internal mechanism, previously hidden, became visible. It wasn't a crude collection of wires and timers, but a meticulously constructed lattice of glowing circuits, intertwined with fiber optic cables that pulsed with an ethereal blue and green light. From within the opening, a section of the backpack's lining peeled back, revealing not a bomb, not a weapon, but a labyrinthine sculpture. It was a kinetic art piece, a marvel of intricate engineering and aesthetic design. Small, delicate robotic arms, barely visible against the shimmering backdrop of lights, began to articulate, extending and retracting with graceful precision. Tiny speakers, previously masked by the backpack's fabric, emitted a series of melodic, almost haunting tones that harmonized with the visual spectacle. This wasn't a destructive device. It was an elaborate, custom-built electronic sculpture, a dazzling display of light and sound, pulsing with an undeniable artistic rhythm. The threat was revealed to be an artist's elaborate, though ill-conceived act of protest. The unusual readings that had sent shivers down the spines of the bomb disposal team were due to its intricate components, the complex interplay of microelectronics and rare earth magnets. Rex's initial intense bark, the one that had started this entire ordeal, was an instinctive reaction not to explosive residue, but to the art piece's highly unusual electronic signature and the subtle, programmed movements of its internal mechanisms. His sensitive ears and nose had picked up on the metallic tang of the components, the faint ozone smell from the circuits, and the minute vibrations of the kinetic elements. He hadn't detected a bomb, but something profoundly out of place, something demanding attention. A collective sigh of relief, audible even across the communication devices, rippled through the security teams. It was quickly followed by a wave of exasperated frustration. All the panic, the evacuation, the global media frenzy, all for a piece of performance art. Miller felt a strange mix of emotions, profound relief that no one was in danger, but also a simmering annoyance at the reckless disregard for public safety. This artist, whoever they were, had unintentionally brought an entire airport to a standstill and terrified thousands. Just as the bomb disposal team began to cautiously approach the now unfurling art piece, a figure emerged from behind a row of check-in counters, hands raised in a gesture of surrender. It was a young man, perhaps in his late 20s, clad in paint-splattered clothes, his face a mixture of fear, defiance, and a strange sort of pride. "It's an art piece," he called out, his voice hoarse but clear through the cavernous terminal. "It's a protest against the erosion of privacy, against the constant surveillance. It's supposed to make people think." He strode forward, seemingly oblivious to the dozen armed officers now converging on him. Those sensors, the scanners, they see everything but the human spirit. My art. He gestured proudly towards the blinking, chirping sculpture. My art sees the wonder in technology, not just the threat. The artist, later identified as Julian Thorne, began to explain his intentions, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke. He detailed the months he'd spent meticulously designing and building the piece, how he'd chosen the airport as his stage because it epitomized the intersection of security and public space. He spoke passionately about wanting to spark a conversation, to force people to confront their fears and preconceptions. The misunderstanding, he claimed, was precisely the point, to highlight how easily fear could be manipulated, how readily technology could be misinterpreted. His elaborate plan, however, had completely backfired, creating terror instead of enlightenment. The immediate relief among security personnel was now heavily laced with the stark reality of the disruption and anxiety he had caused. The whirring from the backpack intensified, no longer a subtle undulation, but a distinct mechanical whir that grew louder, accompanied by a quickening of the pulsating lights. Then, with a soft, almost theatrical click, a small section of the backpack unzipped itself, slowly at first, then revealing an internal mechanism that shifted and swiveled. It was not an explosive device. Instead, a complex, custom-built electronic sculpture, intricate and delicate, slowly unfolded itself, extending glowing fiber-optic tendrils that danced in the sterile air. The lights within it, previously a static pulse, now swirled in mesmerizing patterns, changing colors from an ominous red to a calming blue, then a vibrant green. Soft, synthesized tones, almost melodic, began to emanate from it, filling the vast terminal with an ethereal soundscape. Officer Miller stared, his mind struggling to reconcile the threatening scenario with the strange, beautiful object now presented before him. This was no bomb. This was art. An elaborate, undeniably disruptive, but ultimately harmless art piece. The threat was not terrorism, but an artist's elaborate, albeit incredibly ill-conceived, act of protest against the dehumanizing aspects of modern airport security protocols. The unusual readings that had baffled the bomb disposal unit were simply due to the sculpture's intricate electronic components, its numerous wires, sensors, and programmed microchips. Rex's distinct bark, previously interpreted as an alert to danger, now made perfect sense. A canine's instinctive reaction to the unusual electronic signature and the art piece's subtle programmed movements, a technology far beyond the realm of typical luggage. A profound wave of relief, mixed with a simmering frustration, washed over Miller and the hidden security personnel. The immediate danger had evaporated, replaced by a sense of bewildered exhaustion. From behind a thick support column, a figure slowly emerged, hands raised in a gesture of surrender. It was a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, dressed in nondescript clothing, yet with an intense, almost defiant look in her eyes. "It's art," she stated, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "It's a statement about how we're all just data points, scanned and processed, losing our humanity in the name of security." She identified herself as Ilara, an independent artist, and began to explain her intentions, detailing how she had spent months designing and building the piece, intending it to be a peaceful, thought-provoking disruption, not a bomb scare. She believed the spectacle would force people to question the unseen forces that shaped their travel experiences. Ilara was promptly taken into custody for questioning. While her intentions might have been artistic and philosophical, the consequences of her actions were undeniable. Massive disruption, widespread panic, and the deployment of extensive emergency resources. She would undoubtedly face charges for creating a public disturbance, causing panic, and potentially incurring significant costs related to the airport evacuation. However, the immediate, terrifying danger had been completely averted. Slowly, carefully, security personnel began to assess the scene, and within hours, the airport started the painstaking process of resuming normal operations. The air traffic controllers, ground crews, and airline staff all breathed a collective sigh of relief as the first announcements for reboarding flights began to echo through the terminal again. Officer Miller knelt beside Rex, stroking his loyal partner's head. "Good boy, Rex," he murmured, his voice laced with affection and pride. "You did your job. You always do." Rex leaned into the touch, his tail giving a soft, contented thump against the polished floor. It was a poignant moment, a quiet acknowledgement of Rex's unwavering instincts, even when the threat wasn't a conventional one. The incident, bizarre and stressful as it had been, served as a powerful reminder of the complexities of security in a modern, often unpredictable world. It underscored the invaluable, multifaceted role of K-9 units in maintaining public safety, capable of detecting not just explosives or narcotics, but also the unusual, the unexpected, the subtly anomalous. Even an elaborate art piece designed to spark dialogue. Threats, it turned out, could indeed come in the most unexpected and unconventional forms, and constant vigilance, coupled with adaptable and intelligent responses, was always, unequivocally, the key to safety. If you found this incredible story compelling, please do us a huge favor. Take a moment to like this video, share it with your friends and family, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next incredible story of courage, dedication, and unexpected events that unfold in the most public of places. And for another fascinating tale, be sure to watch our previous video about a daring rescue operation in the heart of a bustling city right after this.